but I noticed in his back pocket he had these little teeny burn holes from where his wallet was in his pocket.
I got it.
I don't think he knows that he like something was burning his pocket.
Had a balloon floating on the other side of the lecture hall, and he popped the balloon with his laser ray gun.
I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. We were at lunch one time with my mom and them, and Kathy had just invented nipples for people after they have breast cancer
Yeah.
surgery.
Hmm.
She made these nipples that were like real flesh-like,
Yeah.
and so she had them in a little box, and she went around the restaurant saying, "Would you like to see my nipples?" I'm Debbie with By Storytellers, and I'm here with Chester Richards. Do you like to be called Chet or Chester?
Chet is
Chet?
good.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're here with Chet. He's the author of From the Potato to Star Trek and Beyond, the memoirs of a rocket scientist. So that's exciting, actually, to learn about that. It's a collection of essays. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it, Chet?
Well, basically, I've had an interesting life. I've done a whole bunch of stuff that most people don't get around to doing in terms of outdoor adventures and also my experience in the aerospace industry, dealing with rocketry and satellites and things of that sort. And along the way, I've met some absolutely fascinating people. And so we'll get into the motivation for writing the stories. But a number of years ago, I just started writing stories about these experiences and drawing from previous journals that I had. And each one of the stories is independent, um, and collectively they assemble into books. And you can go into a book and you can pick a story out in any order. It doesn't matter which order, but in combination, they cover a lifetime. So I've got two books that are. One book is already has been on the market for a couple of years. The second book is coming out in October, which we'll talk about, and I've got a thing up here,
Chet
cover artist for
continues.
that.
That sounds fun.
And then there's a third book in the series, which is actually a trilogy. And the third book will it's been written, but we haven't edited it yet, so it'll be another year or two before that comes out.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, um, honestly, I'm really interested in your rocket scientist work, but we'll get into that later because I write science fiction, and
Oh,
so
you do?
I like
Oh,
all the
fantastic.
gadgets.
I grew up in the golden age of science fiction, the
Hmm.
1950s. And so I devoured everything that came out in that era. And now we're living in that period.
We are.
This is my future. It's your present, but it's my future.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of almost that old too. I remember thinking about everything, and yeah, now we've seen so many different technology changes in our lifetime, and we're warned about things that are happening now. What do you
Yeah,
think
I
about all
mean,
that?
there was stuff in the stories back in the 1950s, um, projected into this time frame, into the early 21st century. And they were just, my goodness, a flat screen color television on the wall, that
Yeah.
being able to talk around the world with video communications, all of that was in the stories, and it was all science fiction. Of course, having space stations and going to the moon and everything else, that
Hmm.
was all science fiction as well in that period.
Hmm.
And then, of course, there's the fantasy elements that things that are not physically possible, but we have a lot of fun playing around with stories.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really neat. So, first, let's get into your book, and Sarah. Let's get that covered because it's so poignant and inspiring to people that have gone through things like loss and having be able to read your thoughtful essays, I think will help people.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's actually the motivation for writing the stories because Sarah died almost 20 years ago, 19 years ago. And she just literally collapsed in front of me with her heart stopped,
Mm.
which, you're waiting for you put in the 911 call and you're waiting for people to show up. And you know that every minute is potentially lethal and so on. Well, she did pass away as a result of that. And I had never experienced anything even remotely close to that. Because, you know, you have ups and downs as you go through life and everything, but this is really, it hits you in a way that's indescribable. People who've been through it understand. People who haven't been through it, you have no idea what it's like. Um, so I was in the deepest of depression. I guess you could call it hell. It's as close to the description of hell as you can possibly get. And what I found was a really interesting thing. I started writing the um, memorial for the funeral mass, and I just found putting words on paper about Sarah and her life and things that she had experienced and things that we had experienced together. I just found it lifted some of the burden. So after the funeral and after the wake, and I had people came from all over for that, and we had a good party. Um, I thought really hard about how to get out of this situation. And I decided, well, heck, you know, if I got uplifted a little bit by writing the memorial, maybe I should just start writing. So that's what I started doing. I just said, okay, I'm going to write a story, and I'm going to write it as if I'm writing a letter to Sarah.
Mhm.
It's something that I've experienced. She knew the story. Well, I'm just going to write it down, and I'm just going to make it a letter to her. So that was the first story in the series. And I just started writing letters to Sarah. And each one of those was a story. And each one lifted me a little bit closer to sunlight.
Oh,
And after a year or so of that experience, I wasn't fully recovered. You never fully recover from the experience, obviously. But I was back to something close to a normal life. And I was able to get on with my life and my career and things of that sort.
oh,
So
yeah. They say that journaling.
just the exercise of putting stuff down on paper, expressing your feelings and through the stories of, you know, I don't write the stories as oh my God, this is what happened, isn't it horrible kind of stuff. I write the stories as, hey, this is a lot of fun that I had. This is a really interesting adventure. And won't, you know, with picture in my mind, people in front of me, I'm telling the story to. And that's the way I write, by the way. I write to somebody else. I don't write to the paper or to the computer screen. I write to a person who's listening to the story as it's being told.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes it interesting that all your essays are so interesting. They, when I was in high school, I learned that journaling is a way to get things that are inside of you out and kind of reconcile it in your brain. Maybe think about it. I think that when people journal and write their thoughts down, it helps them heal a little bit anyway. But it's really nice that you have such a way with words that you can put it into something that is interesting also and enough to publish a book on it that will
Yeah.
inspire other people.
Well, and you know, apparently I have a style of writing that people find very congenial. They
Hmm.
enjoy the stories.
Yeah.
So, and of course, a lot of the stories are about people that I've run into along the way. I've run into the most fascinating people. Uh, well, of course, with the industry that I work in, you're going to find genius, and I write about real geniuses that are behind the scenes that nobody knows about, but who actually make the world work
Oh, tell
from
us about
behind the
that.
scenes, you know.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, for example, for about 4 years, I worked in a company, um, and half the staff it was a small group of people, about 20 people, but half the staff were the guys that put us on the moon. They were the guys that designed the rocket engines and built the rocket engines
Wow.
for the rockets that put us on the moon. So I got to know these guys working literally side by side, sitting next to them at their desks and working on projects together with them. Um, these are real people. You know, they're not just names in a history book. They're real
Mhm.
people doing real things. And you know, so I talk about one of my favorites. I mentioned him in the second book, and that's Tom Coltis. Tom Coltis he's an American hero, because what happened in the Saturn rocket that took us to the moon was they flew 5 flights without people on board. And then, but they were test flights. And then they flew a sixth flight where they had all of the right weights. Basically, it was a full simulation of the full scale launch, but there still weren't people on board. And what they found out from that flight was if an astronaut had been on board that flight, he would have been killed.
Wow.
It turned out that that rocket was so damn dangerous due to excessive vibrations that it would have killed the astronauts.
Oh my gosh.
So they couldn't fly flight number 7, and the Apollo program was dead. It was dead in the water.
Hmm.
So seventh flight was supposed to have astronauts on board.
Wow.
So Tom Coltis was the guy who figured out what the problem was and figured out how to solve it. So and they redesigned the first stage of the rocket with Tom's new design elements, and they flew the rocket and went to the moon.
Wow.
So you know you don't hear about these guys,
Hmm.
but Tom Coltis is a genuine American hero. He saved the Apollo program for the United States.
Oh my gosh. And why don't they talk about things like that? They just don't want people to know.
Well, obviously at the time they weren't going to advertise the fact that they had a failed program, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Hmm.
But then there was Tom, and along came Tom, and you know, as the old song goes, and he solved the problem, and he put him back on the road to the moon.
Wow.
So that's the kind of people that I've run into over the course of my career, and I write about these people. There's some really interesting people.
What did you do in your job?
Oh, everything. Uh, my educational background is two things. I have degrees in physics, and then I had an extended period of graduate school in engineering as well, up to the PhD level. I didn't get the PhD, but I got everything up to that point. Um, so that's my background is engineering physics. But there's more to it than that because after I got my bachelor's degree in physics, I was looking for a job and I had trouble finding a job because there weren't any jobs available at the time. And I wandered around until I found a fairly obscure company that was out in a whole bunch of miles away from where I lived. And I walked in the door and I just said, I'm looking for a job. That's all I did. I just walked in the door. And they said, okay, we'll give you an interview. So they interviewed me and the interview was over and I drove home. And there was a phone call waiting for me when I drove home, when I got home. And the phone call was, where the hell are you? I says, well, I'm at home. What do you expect? I thought the interview was over, you know. He says, come right back. He says, we're going to hire you.
Oh wow.
It turned out because I had done everything wrong in looking for a job, it was exactly the right job because they were looking for a maverick. They were looking for somebody who stuck out, who didn't do things the normal way.
Mhm.
Um, and I was so fortunate in getting into this group. It was the advanced design department of Hycon Manufacturing.
Mhm.
And what they did was for a living, is they built aerial cameras
Hmm.
for reconnaissance for the Air Force and the CIA and other organizations. Um, for example, they built cameras for the U-2 and the SR-71 reconnaissance
Oh,
aircraft.
my favorite plane,
Yeah,
SR-71. I love that plane.
yeah, and they built a camera for the X-15 rocket plane, which I had a chance to work on that camera, which was a lot of fun. And then I also worked on the manned orbital laboratory was for the 2 years that I stayed in that position. But the thing was, the advanced department was deliberately set up as a group of inventors.
Hmm.
So I had the opportunity to be trained as a professional inventor, to learn the
Wow.
art of invention. And it is an art form, and you have to learn it from a master. It's
Mhm.
not something you can get out of a book. You learn by doing.
Mhm.
And so they trained me as an inventor. And
Wow.
so as a consequence of that, my intention was to stay 2 years and then go off to graduate school, which is what I did. With their encouragement, by the way, they thought that was a really good idea. So then I went off to graduate school for a bunch of years and left that and went to work full time in the industry. But when I got into full time work in the industry, um, I was a professional inventor with a physics and engineering background, both. So basically I got all kinds of oddball assignments that generally it was stuff that other people didn't know how to do.
Wow.
So I wandered around the first company I worked for. I worked for almost 10 years, and I had a really good boss, another one of these uh, geniuses that you run into. His name was Bill O'Neill, and he is a major figure behind the scenes. Um, and he just basically said, go do this and go do that and go do this other thing. So my experience just kept getting broader and broader and broader. Um, I for a while I was connected with the Office of Naval Research, and they invited me to, because of the research that I was doing, to join the brain and behavior working group that the that ONR was running. And I got to meet some of the world's greatest biologists and
Mm-hmm.
just have lunch with them and get to be friends with some of the
Mm-hmm.
great scientists in biology as a
Mm-hmm.
result of that experience. And then after about 10 years, I went out and started as a consultant, as a freelance consultant, and managed to survive there, which means I wandered from company to company, getting to know people and doing oddball jobs and so on. Eventually, I ended up my career as an engineering fellow at Raytheon in their space and aeronautics division.
Mm-hmm.
I continued to do very interesting stuff there. So everything under the sun. I've done radar, I've done satellites, I've done rockets, guidance systems for rockets. I've done high energy laser weapons, for example.
Uh-huh.
I was one of the pioneers in that area.
Oh, how
Yeah.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, just all over the map.
Yeah, my mom's friend, Ted Mayman, invented the laser beam.
Oh, yes,
And so when I
yes.
was little, I went into he was friends. He actually was a science advisor on my sci-fi comic book Black
Oh,
Tide.
fantastic.
I was able to talk to him and ask
I'm jealous.
I said, okay, I want to make this microwave laser gun. How long is the beam gonna last and all this stuff. So he gave me the mechanics of it so I could tell the person, Mike Miller, how to draw it. But also I was interested in how the particles kept together and all the different ratios and rates and things like
Yeah.
that. And then we made an antimatter ray gun, and I was surprised to learn that antimatter and matter, when they collide, it'll just be little teeny things, little teeny explosions. It's
Yeah.
not like I thought it'd be this huge thing.
Well, there's not a lot of energy, but there is a lot of it depends on the scale you're looking at. If you're an electron, that's an awful lot of energy. If you're not an electron, it's a very small amount of it.
Yeah, but they attack each other. They don't
Yeah,
attack in
right,
clusters. So
right.
that was interesting to learn. But I went into his lab after school a couple of times actually, and
Yeah,
he had
that was a
all
Hughes
these
research
gadgets.
up in
Yeah,
Malibu, I presume. Yeah.
had all these gadgets. He had like a television. This was before any of this was invented. Before they
Hmm.
had all the lasers you use in medical and things like that. And he had a sewing machine and all the different colors. He had separated all the beams, so he had green pointing one way and blue another
Yeah.
way and red. And he was saying that they don't harm you or anything. But I noticed in his back pocket he had these little teeny burn holes from where his wallet was in his pocket.
I, I got it.
I don't think he knows that something was burning his pocket.
Doesn't surprise me. I was at UC Irvine at the time as a graduate student. He came down to Irvine and gave a lecture, and he pulled this ray gun out of his pocket. And there had a balloon floating on the other side of the lecture hall, and he popped the balloon with his laser ray gun.
Mhm.
I mean, that's the kind
Yeah.
of person he was.
Oh, he
He
was
was, he was
funny
just
and
he was a neat guy. He really
what a
was.
neat man. I love
Yeah,
him. And his wife Kathy was wonderful too.
yeah,
She went to I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm gonna say it anyway. We were at lunch one time with my mom and them, and Kathy had just invented nipples for people after they have breast cancer
yeah.
surgery.
Hmm.
She made these nipples that were like real flesh like.
Yeah.
And so she had them in a little box and she went around the restaurant saying, "Would you like to see my nipples?" Opened up the box.
I think I like this lady.
Just hysterical. It was really funny, but
Yeah,
they felt
cool.
like tissue, like real skin. It was really
Yeah.
good. But what wonderful couple they
Well,
were.
people go through that experience. It's got to be really hard,
Mm,
and anything
yeah,
that helps is good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's fun. I love inventions. It's so neat that you got to work in that. I have a question then.
Sure.
I'm writing the next story arc for my sci-fi comic book Black Tide, and I was thinking of nanotechnology and
Hmm.
how small can they make a camera? Can they make like a nanobug with a camera on it, like a drone, but how small can they make it?
Well, the problem is the smaller the camera, the poorer the resolution is going to be.
Hmm.
Okay, so the smallest possible camera is a single cell, like a single facet from the eye of a bug,
Hmm.
and it basically just sees light and dark in some direction. Okay, so the smaller the camera, the less resolution you're going to get.
Hmm.
Um, so generally, you're limited by what wavelengths you want to deal with. If you want to see invisible light, then visible light typically has a wavelength of a half a micron. So you want a lens that's a little bit larger than at least a few microns in order to produce an image with visible light. Now,
What about,
if you go into ultraviolet or X-rays, then you can build a smaller camera and
okay.
get resolution because the wavelengths are so much smaller.
Oh, interesting. What about frequencies and sound waves? Can you make like a weapon? I don't
Uh,
want to make a weapon, but it's a comic book.
yeah, I know. Well, I've read Dune and seen the movie as well.
Well, we should probably move on. So you wrote a Star Trek episode. Let's talk about that. That's really interesting. I love Star Trek.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, first of all, this was the original Star Trek, the first 3 years, and I
Mhm.
worked in the third year of that. Let me start out by saying Star Trek was a television show, and nobody thought of it as being other than a few minutes on television once a week.
Mhm.
Nobody had any idea where Star Trek was going. None of the cast, nobody working on that show, including my partner Judy Burns and myself. We were just doing a TV show. As it turned out, what we were doing was changing the world. But that happened later, and that happened as a result of the way the fans reacted to the Star Trek's universe. Okay, so what happened was I met Judy Burns in school. She graduated. I was still in graduate school, and funny story. She was an anthropology major, and she had caught the attention of Louis Leakey because she wanted to go down to Tanzania and dig bones with Louis Leakey. So what she did was she went to a lecture that Louis Leakey was giving, and as he was walking out, she slipped a note in his pocket, brushed by him and slipped a note in his pocket. He read the note and invited her to go down to Tanzania with and dig bones with him. But what most people don't realize is the anthropology students and bone diggers mostly have to pay their own way because there's not enough funding from some organization to pay all the staff and everything. So Judy had to raise some money to go down to Tanzania, and she had been a storyteller since she was a little girl. So she said, "Oh, I really love the Star Trek thing. I'm going to write a Star Trek script." So that's what she did. And she got herself a Hollywood agent, Polly Connell, who specialized in young writers. And you don't get through the door anywhere without a Hollywood agent. You've probably figured that one out.
Mhm.
Um, well, the script didn't go anywhere because what happened was the show got canceled after the second season, and the script was lost in the slush pile. But in the meantime, Judy was taking a script writing class from an old pro named Bob Duncan. Uh, and she kind of roped me in. She said, "Oh, you got to watch television. There's this good stuff on television." And I was a graduate student who knew what television was. Um, about the only time I watched television was when we landed on the moon. And Yeah, I had a television set I had bought for that purpose, by the way, is to watch the moon landing. Um, but she sat me down and she played me a bunch of tapes that she had made of Star Trek episodes. So I had the thing in my mind. And I guess it really got pretty deeply embedded in my mind because I went to sleep one night and I had a dream. And the dream was that I was on the bridge of the Enterprise and there was a ghost haunting the bridge. That was in my
Wow.
dream. And it woke me up. This scary dream. What kind of a nightmare was that, you know? No, actually, I didn't find it scary at all. I just found it really interesting. This ghost was wandering through the walls and going up to people and scaring the bejesus out of them. But I was just sitting on the sidelines watching this. And so I woke up and made some notes and went back to sleep. And I called Judy in the morning. I said, "Hey, you're looking for a story idea. Here's a story idea. Why don't we put a ghost on the Enterprise?" And she said, "That's a terrific idea." She says, "Why don't you join me and we'll write it together?" So we teamed up, and she invited me, managed to talk Bob Duncan into letting me audit the script writing class. So I learned some stuff there and became friends with Bob Duncan and Wanda, his wife. Um, so one day at the post party at the end of when the course was finishing up, Bob Duncan asked Judy and I, whatever happened to that speculative script that you guys wrote? It's a pretty good script. And Judy says, well, this show went off the air. They finally came back on the air for a third season. They've got a whole new crew up there. We'll put the script in, but who knows what it's going to happen to it. And Bob said, um, well, who's the new producer on that show? Judy says, it's some guy named Fred Freiberger. And Bob just lit up and he says, "Oh, he says, I've known Freddie forever." He says, "We've done so many shows together. We did Wild Wild West and a whole bunch of other stuff."
Wow.
And he says, "I'll call Freddie in the morning and get him to read your script," which he did.
Hmm.
So Judy and I went up to what to see the movie 2001, the
Oh,
Kubrick
yeah.
movie. We saw that at the Grauman Chinese Theater.
Hmm.
And then we went to the Mongolian barbecue and had a nice meal after that, drove the long way back to Orange County. We got back to Judy's house. She was living with her parents for a brief while then. And her sister comes running out of the house and sister says, "Hey, Judy, there's this guy named Fred something or other. He's been calling all evening. He wants you to call immediately that you get home. Doesn't matter what time of night, just give him a call." And Judy says, "Was that Fred Freiberger?" And her sister said, "Yeah, that was Fred Freiberger." So Judy called the guy and he says, "Yeah, we want to see you 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, Paramount Studios."
Wow.
So we were up before the sun the next morning,
Yeah. Oh, how
driving
fun.
up to Los Angeles to get through the traffic and up there. We had to talk our way past the gate because Freiberger hadn't bothered to put our name at the entrance to the
They
Paramount
forget
Studios.
sometimes.
Yeah.
You'd think so. It's like the
But
most
Judy was a
important thing
really
in your
good
life, and they forgot to put your name at the gate. It happens a lot.
But Judy was a really good talker. You had to understand this lady. And so she talked her way past the guard and got directions to go to the bungalow where the Star Trek was production was being managed. And so, we got into Fred Freiberger's office and sat down on a sofa, and the Arthur Singer, the story editor, came in and sat next to me, and um, Bob Justman, the associate producer, who was the real brains behind the third season, came in and started talking about how they were going to buy our script. They thought it was a really good story. However, Bobby had these notes and he was you couldn't stop him. He was a bundle of energy, I guess you could say, and he just kept walking back and forth. He would walk back and forth across the office with his secretary 2 steps behind him, taking down in shorthand everything he had to say.
Wow.
And he went through this bundle of notes that he had made about the script. And he basically changed everything in the story. So we had basically had to throw the story completely out, throw the script completely out, change all the characters, change the emphasis and all the rest of that stuff. And Judy was poking me in the elbow in the with her elbow in my ribs at the time, saying, "Don't say a thing, just agree to everything," you know.
Yeah, it's amazing that they let you rewrite it rather than giving it to somebody else. So
So
that
they
was
got through
good.
with that. So we accepted all the changes. And I'm sitting directly, or the two of us are sitting directly across from Freiberger, and he's just taking it all in, just watching to see how we're going to react to all of this. Because we're unknowns, you know.
Mhm.
They don't know whether we're capable of doing anything or
Mhm.
flash in the pan kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So Justman gets through with all his changes that he wants made in the story. And Fred Freiberger looks at us and he says, well, he says, you know, we're on a really tight schedule. He says, we need a rewrite on the script. We need the script, not just a story treatment, but we need the script next Friday. Now, this was Friday where we had the meeting, and we
Wow.
had 1 week to write a whole new story and a whole new script
Wow.
and get it into them, which we did. On the
Awesome.
drive home, we blocked out what the new story was going to be. And then we sat and talked probably until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, Judy and I. And it was during that conversation, the evening conversation, that we invented the key element of the story, which is the Tholian's Web, which became the key part of that episode. And the Tholian, the web element, uh, won the episode an Emmy for special
Wow.
effects.
That's awesome.
So,
And your script's in the Smithsonian right now, isn't it?
pardon?
I heard your script is in the Smithsonian.
Oh yeah, well that came later, but you know, basically, Mike Miner did the stop action animation of the web, which was a masterful piece of art, and one basically made his career as an art director in Hollywood. He was art director on the Star Trek movies, by the way, the early Star Trek movies. Um, Judy Burns uh, was invited to join Mission Impossible as a scriptwriter for Mission Impossible, and that made her career.
Wow.
And she had an extraordinarily successful career. She was story editor on the Star Trek movies, and then became producer of a number of successful TV shows. The last TV show that she created, and it was her creation, was MacGyver.
Oh, I love MacGyver.
And she was associate producer of MacGyver, but it was her baby. She created that show.
Wow.
So that's the gal I was working with, the level of talent that I was working
Wow.
in working with Judy. But what happened was years later, I had a lot of business that took me to Washington, D.C., and on weekends I'd go down to the mall and go to the various museums and National Gallery and places. So I walked into the American History Museum one day, walked up the steps, and the very first exhibit that they had uh, as you entered the museum was a Star Trek exhibition. And right smack in the center of the Star Trek exhibition was the rainbow script that Judy and I had done.
That's amazing.
So
Wow.
yeah, that's part of the fallout. It was, you know, it's kind of stunned me. I mean, they thought that script was the best, so that's what they put on display.
Oh, that's so lovely. So lovely. So I want to hear more about your adventures. You have some wonderful adventures. You want to talk about something?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Southern California, and of course, if you're not a surf fiend in Southern California, you don't belong here.
Well,
So I became a surfer, and I had a number of, you know, I got very comfortable in the water and had a lot of interesting experiences, which I've written about. I've written a couple of stories about that. Um, and but that really got me interested in all kinds of water experiences. And one of the things that had happened when I was a small boy was my parents went to the Grand Canyon, and I got a chance on that excursion to go to the Kolb Brothers studio. The Kolb Brothers had, in I think it was 1913, taken a wooden boat down the length of the Grand Canyon
Oh,
on the Colorado River, and they had taken a movie camera. This is 1913, and they had a movie
wow.
camera with them. And so they did a film of their adventure uh, going down the, boating through the canyon. And we saw that film. Emery Kolb narrated the film for us, for the small audience that was there. And I was just absolutely fascinated. And my dream was to take a boat trip through the Grand Canyon. So, um, come the early 1970s, and I finally had the resources to do that. And I signed up with a company that, excuse me,
Mhm.
um, it's a company called Oars, which is um, has become the most famous company running boats in the canyon now. And signed up as a passenger and went through the Grand Canyon. And the experience was a life-changing experience. It's really hard to explain. You go in being one kind of a person, you come out of that experience being something completely different. The canyon does that to people, and it did it to me. It's hard to describe the experience. It's a tranquilizing experience, but it's also eye-opening. I mean, you have a lot of adventures. But the interesting thing that happened as part of that experience was I decided to keep a journal.
Hmm. Okay.
And so every day I would write the events of the day in my journal. And it turned out I had no idea, but people wanted to know what was in that journal. So I started reading the day's events around the campfire. And people thought I was a really good storyteller. So they said, keep on doing this. So I did that excursion. And then I did a whole bunch of other excursions with that company, which is now part of Sobek and Mountain Travel. Um, and I went off on an excursion to Africa, on an expedition in Africa with these guys doing a river run through wild territory there.
Oh, wow.
There's a part of Africa where the bugs keep the people away, so that's just you know. And so I had that experience, and then dealing with natives once we came out of that area. Um, and
Were they
all
friendly?
along I was keeping a journal, and eventually I actually got trained as a boatman and rode a boat through the Grand Canyon myself, was an interesting experience. And then after that I was busy doing consulting in the aerospace industry and did a few other things. I did some scuba diving down in the Caribbean and did some sailing around in tall ships and things of that sort. Um, all of which led to stories. A lot of it has been written down. Um, so all of that was material that I had to draw upon when I started writing these stories after Sarah died, and then there's been continuing since that time as well. New people to meet, new experiences to have.
That's neat. In your bio, it said something about leopards. What happened with the leopard?
Yeah. Well, so at our first camp in Africa we were let me explain a little bit. The expedition was in Ethiopia, and the primary purpose was to go down a river called the Omo River. The Omo River cuts through a canyon, sort of like the Grand Canyon, and it's a river that's about comparable with the Colorado River in its ferocity, size and ferocity as well. But in that canyon, primarily because of the tsetse flies, there's no inhabitants in that area because the flies carry a disease that kills cattle, and the people live with cattle in those parts of the world. So, um, so we did a little warm up excursion before we did the main expedition. We went down to the Afar Triangle, which is in the northeast part of the country, down in the desert lands. Um, and we ran a river called the Awash River, and that was just a 2 day excursion. But we spent 2 or 3 days down there camping out. And at our first campsite, there was a little building, and there was a cage outside the building. It was an undeveloped parkland, but they had this little building just to take care of the local. Take care of the river and the waterfall that was nearby. Outside that little building was a cage, and in that cage was a leopard. And I had wandered down to the building before breakfast, and I saw this leopard sitting in the cage, and the leopard was so lonely, I just had to sit down next to the leopard. Um, well, the cage had bars that were that wide, they're
Wow.
foot or so wide. So the leopard could poke his head through the bars in the cage. I wanted to pet the leopard, but I just decided that I couldn't take the chance of any possible injury. So I held up from doing that. But I sat and chatted with the leopard, and the
Hmm.
leopard and I became friends. And the leopard started purring,
Oh,
and he got up, he stretched, he nuzzled against the bars of the cage, came down and purred some more, and the purr got more intense. And the two of us became friends for about a half an hour, just sitting and chatting together.
wow. Do you know why he was in
Uh,
the cage?
Pardon?
Do you know why he was in the cage?
I have no idea.
Oh.
He was probably they were. I have no. Well, it may be there was a Lindblad tour that was going to come through and camp out in that area,
Mm.
which I do write about. And they may have imported the leopard just to show off the Lindblad tour. So it was
Oh.
for other tourists.
Oh,
But
it make me sad to have a wild
but yeah, I
person in
just,
a
I'm
cage.
to this day I still have wonderful images in my mind of sitting and chatting with this leopard. I mean, literally we're face to face,
Oh, that's nice.
inches apart.
That's
And
nice.
and it was just a big kitty. It was
Oh,
just a
yeah.
big kitty.
I was hiking actually. We have a My family had a ranch by Mount Shasta, and I was hiking up this mountain, um, and I get impatient, and so I decided instead of hiking at the end of the trail behind everybody else, I decided to climb up the face of the cliff, right? So I did
Not a
that.
good idea.
Well, I did it. I used to do that a lot. So anyway, I get up to the top, and I'm face to face with the mountain lion. I mean, like he's right
Oh
here.
yeah.
I could feel its breath on my face. Its face was this big, and its eyes. And my first thought was, oh, so beautiful. And I saw
Yeah.
the beautiful eyes and the beautiful whiskers and the beautiful nose and then the mouth, and I went, and ducked, But then, and a minute later, I went back up, and then it was like
Yeah,
running
it's gone.
away.
Yeah.
But that was, I love that
I
experience.
suspect that mountain lion was just as surprised as you were.
Absolutely. Yeah. At the top of this mountain, and we took a picture afterwards of us on the same spot, and just you see mountaintops forever. And it was just a beautiful
Yeah.
spot. But yeah, he was probably like, I think it hadn't eaten either. So but you're in the wild. Usually they stay away from
Well,
you.
he's not, given the physical circumstance, he wasn't going to attack you because
No.
that means he would have gone off the cliff, and that's not something he wanted to do. But
Yeah. I
he
mean, I'm glad he
probably,
didn't wait for
my
me either.
guess is, my guess is that he heard you climbing and he was just curious to find out what was making the noise.
Could be. Yeah, it could be. But it was just amazing that he was right there at the edge, like
Yeah.
like, I mean, I could still feel the breath on my face from him. But
Oh
I think it was a
yeah.
girl actually, but so beautiful, and
Oh
what
yeah.
a
Well,
neat experience.
this is yeah. It's really interesting. I live in Thousand Oaks and up in the hills here.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first moved in, one of my neighbors was telling me the story. He was out riding a bicycle in the neighborhood here, and he looked down, and there was a mountain lion that was pacing him on beside his bicycle,
Oh,
and he had to decide. he had to What do you do in that circumstance? And he decided, well, the mountain lion hasn't done anything. I'll just keep pedaling. So that's what he did.
hmm.
And the mountain lion paced him for some substantial distance. And then his curiosity was satisfied. He ran away.
Yeah,
But so we do have that. We have those creatures around here. We
I live
do.
in your area too, so
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think that fortunately, I think in our experiences we've learned that if you, I don't know, They've never bothered me. I run into bears and things like that also, and wild
Yeah,
animals in the backyard,
right.
and they never bother me. But then I think it depends on your circumstances. It's always a little bit scary, especially if you're out by yourself. But anyway, we've been
Well,
lucky.
yeah, no, I've had coyotes in the yard,
Yeah,
and
coyotes.
things of that sort. And basically, they're frightened of you. They don't want to have anything to do with you. I
Yeah.
had a den of coyotes in the embankment across the street. They grew up,
Mm-hmm.
and then in when I was a kid and we lived in Glendale, we lived in the hills, and we literally had a coyote and a coyote family with its litter, with its kids, living in the backyard in
Mm-hmm.
the chaparral behind the fence. And
Yeah, you can
those
hear them at night.
coyotes and their kids grew up with our cat,
Oh,
and our cat and the coyotes apparently, I don't know if they were friends, but they left each other alone pretty much.
oh, that's good.
So
That's
yeah,
good.
you
I
live with
rescued
wild,
I rescued my dog from a coyote once.
yeah,
My puppy actually bit the coyote underneath and scared it away too. You get raccoons and bobcats, and
yeah,
I like living in the hills. You know, it's fun. But anyway, so tell me about your next book because we're almost out of
sure.
time.
Well,
Yeah.
it's a continuation of the same. It's more stories, and I write about interesting people that I've run into in interesting situations. Um, so some of the stories are whitewater stories, and there's some thrilling stuff that I've been through in that respect. I've got a list of stories here. So some of them have to do with adventures, like almost being in an airplane crash, things
Oh
of
my
that sort.
gosh.
We didn't crash, but we came very close. And I tell you a little bit about that story. I was at Air Force ROTC at the time as an undergraduate, and I was on a flight, and the airplane ran out of oil,
Mm. Oh.
and so we had to get into our parachutes,
Oh
and we were
no.
standing at the doorway, looking out the door at the ocean below us, wondering whether we were going to have to jump out of the airplane.
Oh my gosh. Did you have to jump?
No, I didn't have to jump.
Oh,
I
you
wouldn't have
didn't.
survived the jump.
Oh wow. Wow.
Um, but that's one of the stories in here, and then there's other stories. Um, so yeah, it's more of the same. I talk a little bit about family, and there's some vignettes about my wife Sarah, giving you a little bit of an insight as to what kind of an extraordinary person I was privileged to live with. Um, she was an amazing woman. A little bit about Sarah. She had had a pretty tough childhood. Her father had been a fighter pilot killed in World War II, and her stepfather was apparently okay, but there was really no affection between the two of them. Um, so she grew up in a fairly difficult childhood and managed to somehow find her way. But this is a woman of extraordinary intellect. I mean, really, really intelligent, gifted woman. Um, as a musician, she played violin and piano and sang professionally. She sang with the Seattle Opera, um, and she was even invited to sing with the the New York Opera. So,
Wow.
I mean, she had an extraordinary career as a singer. Um, she also had degrees in um, anthropology, a master's degree in English literature, and a master's degree in psychology, and was a trained psychotherapist, licensed psychotherapist
Hmm.
as well.
Wow.
And as a psychotherapist, she specialized in dealing with criminal elements.
Ooh. Actually, oh, that's amazing.
Well,
Well,
I got to tell you, being married to a psychotherapist is an interesting experience.
yeah, I
It's,
bet.
when we first got together, she says my job is to sand off your rough edges.
Well, you don't seem to have rough edges now, so she must have done a good
I still
job.
I still have a few rough edges. Yeah. but you should have seen me win.
Oh, how nice. Oh, I'm sure you miss her still. It's hard.
Oh yeah, I
How long
mean,
does it take you to get over something like that?
you
You never
never
get over
get
the
completely
grief,
over
right?
it. Yeah, the way I feel, I've kept the house. I've changed some things around the house, but I've kept enough of her in the house. Things that she really liked. Um, so I still have the feeling that she's here,
Mm-hmm.
that she's just around the corner in the next room. Um, but to give you a sense of what it was like, so I'd go off to work and I'd have a hard day at work, and I was working down in El Segundo, which is a 100-mile round trip to, so there was a hard commute. And I'd come home and I'd be frazzled from the events of the day and so on. And I'd open the door and she would sing out, "Hi, Chet, welcome home.
Oh,
How was your day?" And of course she had a musical voice. So there was a lilt in her voice when she greeted me. But that was the greeting that I got every day when I came
wow.
home from work. There was no sense of stress or strain. Her interest was in making life as enjoyable as possible for me. And of course, that reciprocated, you know.
Mhm.
Obviously, we teamed together. We had a very, very harmonious relationship, the two of us.
Oh, nice. That's
So I miss
wonderful.
her. I mean, obviously, and you never get over it.
They say they never leave us and that they're around, and I feel people that like my mom and dad and my brother died recently, and
Oh,
I
I'm
I
sorry.
thank
Yeah.
you. I feel them around also, but it's different. It's like that's why I write about in my books. I write that we need to cherish people while we're here, because even if you believe in reincarnation or other things, another world and heaven and all that jazz, having this experience that we have here physically with these people is never going to happen again. So we
Yeah.
need to cherish what we have now and the relationships we have now, say what we think as we think it, and tell people how we feel about them, because that's the most important thing, and that's what we'll remember later when they're gone.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But they do stay with you. They're still in
Yeah.
you. They are the ghost inside of you,
Hmm.
and then the ghost in the next room, just around the corner, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you've had some experience that's equivalent to mine, so you understand what I went through.
Yeah. Yeah, I did. But I think a lot of people have, which is I think why books like yours are so helpful, because when people read other people's stories like that, I think it helps them in their grief and helps them in their lives. So it's good that what you do. The essays are especially when they're compelling like you have written.
Yeah, well, the feedback I've gotten from other people is that they're very touched by what I wrote about uh, my experience with Sarah, and the memorial that I wrote is for the funeral is also in that first book.
Hmm.
So you get a deeper sense as to who this person really was that I and Sarah's in every one of the stories, because basically I'm writing the stories to her. They're still letters to her,
Oh, that's
you
nice.
know.
That's nice. So it was really nice to meet you. We've got to go now, but I really enjoyed meeting you and talking with you.
Oh,
And
it's been a pleasure, Debbie. This has been a lot of fun.
yeah,
Really
I'll
enjoyed
talk
it.
to you again. We're in the same area. Maybe we're running into each other.
Oh, cool.
But you take care. I love you, and I wish you well and
Well,
a lot
thank
of
you so
happiness.
much.
Good luck with your next book. When your next book comes out, we'll do this again, okay?
Yeah, indeed. Well, it's coming out. The book two comes out in October, but then there's going to be a year or two delay to get the third book out. But we'll have a chance to chat
All
again.
right, we'll chat again. All right, you take
Okay,
care. And
that was
thank
way
you.
cool.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us, and check his book out, From the Potato to Star Trek and Beyond, Memoirs of a Rocket Scientist. And your website will be on the podcast so people
Okay,
can
very
check you
good.
out. Okay,
Thanks a lot.
bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.